All right, so this one is going to be about linear equations, just the beginning concepts of them. When we're doing linear equations, it's related to graphing. Right now, so far we've solved equations that look like this. One variable, right? But now we're going to work with equations that look like this. Now, there's two variables, so what do we do? Well, this is where graphing comes in handy. Graphing, because there's two variables, there can be multiple different solutions, infinite number of solutions that can come because of these two variables. And we graph that in the form of a line. So an equation like this will give you a line. Usually you see it in the form of this. But you can occasionally see it in that form as well. So with this one, what we're trying to find is which numbers are going to produce a solution. And usually we do that by plugging in one number and seeing what the other number is. And then by doing that, as you can see, we get a line. So let's kind of talk about that here. Let's pick an equation that's pretty easy. Let's do, to talk about y, let's do 3x plus y equals 2. All right, that's pretty simple. So now we need to pick x numbers and y numbers. Now, why would we need to pick that? We need to pick x numbers to find out what y is, because if you remember, we're going to be graphing, and a linear equation produces a line. In order to do that, we need 2 points. So if we're going to mark this out, so first we're going to look at this. What happens when x is 0? Y, it looks like, okay, so x is 0. So this is the first point I always go for, is when x is 0, because it's easy. You just plug a 0 in there, and you get whatever's left. So y equals 2. This is called a table. We're going to create a table of values to discuss. You'll see that in your lesson right here. We're creating a table of values to help us pinpoint a line. So far, our first point is right here. If you will recall, our points look like this. So 0, 2 is a point. 1. And we're going to do negative 1 because that's easy, and we're going to do 2. All right, so when we plug in x for 1, we get 3 times 1, right? Plus y equals 2. So we're going to minus 3 because it's times 1. So y equals negative 1. Okay, that's pretty easy. Okay, I like that. That's okay. So now we're going to say y equals negative 1. So when x is 1, y equals negative 1. That's cool. So it's right here. Now negative 1. This is a tricky one because it's negative. So when we plug it in, so negative 3 plus y equals 2. We can add 3. Y equals 5. All right, so when x is negative 1, y is 5. Okay, so let's give you all the way up there. All right, does that make sense? So now we're going to take and we're going to plug in 2 and see what happens. So let's see, 3 times 2 plus y equals 2. 6 plus y equals 2 minus 6 minus 6 negative 4. So now we've got a line that's formed. If you can see it, we've got it formed in dots here. And that's how a line forms in these equations. You pick one variable and solve for the other. So we're going to create a line here. So if you could see this, now that we've got these points, we can draw a line through them. And it might not fit exactly because I started on the wrong point. There we go. See how it draws a line? Now we have a line. We've created a line. Now lines are, the steepness of a line is determined by the slope. So let's look at an equation about slope. So this is talking just about, we're going to look at what slope is. So if we're looking at 4.2, if you can go to page 155, it'll talk about, or 157 will talk about slope. So when we're talking about a slope, let's take this equation, which we did. Slope is our m term. We call it m. And there's different ways to describe it. In your book, you'll see different ways to describe m. But really, it's the change of rise over run. So right here, the slope formula is y1 minus y2, x1 minus x2. The change is y and change over x and change, or rise over run is the best way I remember it. So in this case, let's solve this equation so we can see our slope. Our slope is always our x value, but we need it to look like this. All right. Now, if we do that, so we're going to solve that, it'll be y, we're going to minus 3x. So y equals negative 3x plus 2. So this is something to remember. Our slope in this case, negative 3. And it's always good to remember that it's over 1. Now, if we're going to discuss this, negative 3 over 1, that's rise over run. What that means is for every 1 that we go left or right, we go 3 up. Or for every 3 down we go, because it's negative slopes go down. Then let's say we go 1, 2, 3, we have to go over 1, and that's where our point is. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, over 1, there's a point. So as you can see that, if we go from here and we go up 3, or over 1, up 3, we get there. And so if you see that the slopes are related to how steep a line is. M is your slope. M will always be your slope, so let's talk about just some slopes here. If we're given an equation like this, it looks like, well, as soon as I can get rid of everything on there, it looks like this. 3x plus 2y plus equals 2. This is going to be a different equation, okay? So we're going to solve for y. Divide by 2. Plus 1. All right. Now let's do something with this equation. You can see how the slope changes it. So this is our slope, m equals negative 3 over 2 plus negative 3 over 2, which is rise over run. So first off, we know one thing. When x is 0, what is y? It's 1. That's cool. So it's right there, it's 1. Now let's see, when x is negative 1, because we cross out the x term, we get 1. So if x is negative 1, what do we get? Negative 1, we get a positive, so we get a positive. So we get negative 3 halves times negative 1 plus 1 equals 3 halves plus 1 equals 5 halves. So that's a big number, but that's okay. So we're going to go up. It's not really actually that big of a number. It's just barely above 2. So it's like right there. So you see how our line isn't as steep as before? With 2 points, we can create a line. But our line isn't as steep as before. Before, it was like this. Now it's like this one. Like this red line here. This red line is our new line, but you see how it's not as steep as this other one? That's because we have a new slope. It's related, it looks the same, still negative, but we have a new slope, therefore it looks different. So something to keep in mind is the slope is what's going to be most important. It's going to tell you a lot about lines. If you need any help, I'll do special cases of the slope real quick. If you have a graph that looks like this, and you have a line in the graph that looks like this, the equation could be something like this. It's x equals 2 or something. So we're going to call this 2, this point right here, 2. So this slope is undefined. Undefined, okay? So that's what this slope is. So that's good to keep in mind. It's not zero slope, it's undefined. But if you have a line, like this one that's going to be green, like this green line right here, that slope is like y equals 2. We'll call this point 2. Then this slope is m equals 0. And this one, m equals undefined. This one is m equals 0. So those are some special cases of slope to keep in mind. You'll see equations that look like these two. That's how you'll know what your slope is. But yeah, there's you go. Let me know if you have any questions about this, and I'll make some videos that are tailored to this concept.